It all kicked off with the blare of sirens, sharp, insistent, and completely out of place on a peaceful Sunday morning in a sleepy cul-de-sac where the loudest noise was usually a lawnmower or a ticked-off squirrel. I was mid-stroke with my paint roller, standing beside a half-painted brick wall at the edge of my backyard when I glanced up. Two police cruisers rolled in like they were raiding a drug den, lights flashing, doors swinging open with precision. And trailing behind them, strutting like she was on a mission to save the world, was my neighbor Lisa, me personal nightmare, the self-appointed guardian of morality in stretchy leggings. She waved her arms wildly, one hand clutching her phone, the other jabbing at me like I'd just robbed a bank instead of adding a red stripe to what was once a veteran's memorial wall. I stood there, brush in one hand, coffee mug in the other, blinking like I'd stumbled into someone else's MOYE. "That's him," she shrieked, her voice so piercing it could have shattered glass. "He's vandalizing public property. He's slapping militaristic colors and symbols all over it. He threatened me with that paintbrush." One officer approached me cautiously, his gaze darting between me and the wall which, for the record, wasn't anything outrageous. It was just an American flag, half repainted over weathered bricks, with names etched below it. The same names that had been there since 1952. The same wall that once honored fallen soldiers from this town, including my grandfather. But to Lisa it was some kind of rebellious statement, a direct attack on her imaginary neighborhood empire. This was the climax of weeks, months, even of her escalating antics, passive-aggressive notes, weird flyers, and compliance suggestions shoved into my mailbox despite my house being outside her precious HOA's reach. And now she'd call the cops on me for touching up a forgotten tribute. "Sir," the officer said, hand hovering near his belt, "we got a report you're defacing a public surface with unauthorized materials. Are you aware this is city property?" "It's not," I replied, keeping my cool as I pulled a folded copy of my deed from my back pocket, ready for this exact moment. "This is my land. The wall's on my property. Veterans built it in the 50s as a memorial and my grandfather maintained it until the town forgot about it. I'm just fixing it up." Lisa huffed from behind him. "Fixing it up?" "He's covering it. He's turning it into some recruitment sign." "It's a flag," I said flatly. "A flag and names. No slogans, no ad, just history." The officer held up a hand for me to wait and walked over to inspect the wall while his partner dealt with Lisa, who was now spinning a wild tale about me blasting military marches and spraying chemicals that left her dizzy and threatened. I let out a dry, exhausted chuckle, not a real laugh. Just the kind you give when reality gets so absurd it stops adding up. The officer came back, gave me a long look and asked, "Got any security footage from the last few hours?" "Cameras cover the whole yard," I said. "You'll see me painting, sipping coffee, and stretching my back because I'm not young anymore." He nodded, seeming satisfied. But Lisa wasn't letting it go. She paced barefoot on the pavement, ranting to the second officer about how the wall's colors were visually hostile, and my paint choices were a psychological hazard to community wellness. That's when I realized this wasn't about the flag, the wall, or even her need to be obeyed. It was about control, about what happens when someone used to being feared finds out no one's listening anymore. The officer handed back my deed, eyed the half-painted memorial again and said, "Ma'am, the property's his. No violation here." Lisa looked like someone had just canceled her birthday. "So you're just letting him keep going?" she whispered. "You're letting him ruin the neighborhood's VIB? "Ma'am," he said, deadpan, "there's no law against painting a flag on your own land." And in that moment, as Lisa's face crumpled in disbelief as she grasped that her made-up rules held no weight, I picked up my roller, dipped it in white paint, and calmly kept going, feeling the solid, satisfying weight of holding my ground for the first time in weeks. Because this wall wasn't graffiti, it was memory. And no amount of sirens or suburban tantrums was going to stop that. My name's Matt Grayson, and all I wanted when I bought this house on the edge of Pineview W was some quiet. A spot to look after my aging dad, spruce up the yard, and catch my breath after 20 years in the Army chasing a peace I rarely found. When I saw the listing for this old place at the end of the street, with that weathered brick wall out back, something clicked like it was waiting for someone to care again, to honor what it stood for. I didn't mind the work or the peeling paint. It had history. More than that, it had roots tied to my grandfather's name carved into that neglected wall, a piece of our family and our town left to fade under ivy while the neighborhood drowned in beige conformity and HO-approved silence. That wall mattered to me. Before I'd even unpacked, I'd sketched out a plan to bring it back, not to change it or make it loud, just to restore it, one stroke at a time. That's when Lisa stormed into my life like a tornado wrapped in glitter, wielding a clipboard and a superiority complex. She showed up on my porch not with a handshake or cookies, but with a laminated packet labeled "Welcome to Pine View HOA Standards and Guidelines," sliding it across my doormat like it was a legal summons tied with a ribbon. "Hi there," she chirped, her voice so fake sweet it made my teeth ache. "Just wanted to help you start off right. We keep things cohesive around here." When I told her, polite but firm, that my house was one of 4 in the neighborhood outside HOA jurisdiction, that my lot predated their rules, her smile flickered like a bad signal, replaced by something colder. Calculated concern masked as neighborly duty. That's when I knew this wasn't about community pride. It was about control. Lisa didn't just love rules, she believed she was born to enforce them, whether she had the right or not. The first warning sign came 2 days later. My trash cans moved behind the garage with a sticky note reading "Visibility Violation, see page 7, HOA Aesthetic Guidelines," followed by snarky comments about my mulch color, my mowing pattern, and eventually pointed questions about that wall in my yard. "It's a memorial," I told her, watching her eyes narrow like I'd insulted her lineage. From there the tension crept up like weeds, low, stubborn, impossible to ignore. She'd linger during my yard work, accidentally walking her dog past my place 3, 4, 5 times a day, sometimes just standing there, staring as I painted like I was summoning dark forces. Every chat dripped with that tight-lipped politeness, hiding something territorial. She once asked if I'd filed a flag visibility request before repainting the stars. When I reminded her again that I wasn't in the HOA, she snapped, "That doesn't mean your choices don't disrupt our harmony," like I was tainting her world with patriotism. Then came the flyers taped to my mailbox, tucked under my wipers, left in bright yellow envelopes on my porch. Headlines like "Is your neighbor's wall a threat to unity?" and unregulated memorials, "The hidden safety risk," packed with badly sourced blog posts and highlighted rants about psychological overexposure to symbolic imagery. It'd have been funny if it wasn't so deranged. But it got worse. One day, I caught her reaching over my fence with a soup ladle taped to a broomstick, trying to scoop water from my drainage spout. When I asked what the hell she was doing, she said, "Conducting a chemical safety survey. Your paint runoff could be poisoning the soil," and marched off like that was normal. The real breaking point came when she showed up with 2 other women, Sharon and Ellen, self-titled officers of the Pine HOA Environmental Re team in matching pastel polos, armed with clipboards. They strutted up my driveway, announcing, "We're here to audit your decorative structure." When I asked if they meant my backyard wall, they nodded like synchronized robots. Sharon added, "We've had complaints its visual tone might upset the neighborhood's emotional balance." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd it felt like a prank. When I told them they had no right to be on my property, they threatened to escalate through community channels. I shot back, "Good luck winning that in court," and shut the door in their stunned faces. From then on, the line was drawn. Lisa didn't see me as a neighbor anymore, she saw me as a rebel. Every name I painted, every star I traced, every touch-up to honor folks this town once remembered seemed to fuel her delusion of suburban dominance. I kept painting, steady and quiet, but I could feel her watching, always watching, waiting to strike. And deep down I knew it was coming. People like Lisa don't quit until they whine or crash and burn. Something told me she was teetering on the edge of the ladder. The first brushstroke felt like a vow, deliberate, hushed, firm, laying down a stripe of navy blue across chipped brick as the morning sun broke through the mist and birds sang like they had no clue a showdown was brewing. For me, this wasn't about art or defiance, it was about revivifying something sacred, a memorial nearly lost to time, weather, and neglect. As I painted, the names emerged from the grime. My grandfather, Daniel Grayson, private first class; Peter Sullivan, age 19, killed in Korea; Mary Whitaker, a nurse lost in the Pacific. Name after name resurfaced, rising from the brick like spirits ready to be seen again. I worked in silence, but I wasn't alone. Lisa circled like a vulture, pacing the sidewalk beyond my fence, snapping photos, scribbling in her leather-bound incident log, muttering about visual chaos and unauthorized historical edits. I ignored her at first, hoping she'd back off if I gave her nothing. But people like Lisa don't back off, they double down. By day 4, she'd stuffed 6 handwritten letters in my mailbox, each more unhinged than the last, warning of the psychological toll of oversaturated patriotic symbols, accusing me of emotionally manipulating the neighborhood, demanding I submit my paint for HOA color harmony review IEW, which I reminded her again had no power over me. Reason was useless against her warped logic. When that failed, she rallied Sharon and Ellen, who rolled up one afternoon while I was outlining the last white stars, declaring with stone-cold certainty, "We're here for a visual integrity inspection." I blinked, turned down my soft instrumental music and said, "That's not a thing." But they didn't care. I told them they were trespassing. Lisa, filming from the curb, yelled, "We're the HOA. We define this community's character. You can't just build shrines to your family on shared sightlines." Which was not only tone-deaf but flat-out wrong, since my property line, confirmed by my title and City Hall, included the whole wall. They came back the next day with a Neighborhood Atmosphere Protection Manifesto, a jumble of legal-sounding gibberish paired with photos of my paint cans, and a shot of me mid-stroke, captioned "Local agitator repaints wall without consent." I laughed at first, but then my paint supplies were tipped over, my star stencils vanished, and a note on a Whole Foods receipt warned, "Stand down for neighborhood stability." It wasn't funny, Anna Marie, it was personal, invasive, illegal. So I set up cameras, motion lights, full surveillance. 3 days later, I caught Lisa on tape at 5:41 a.m., sneaking into my yard in gardening gloves and sneakers, wielding a ladle taped to a selfie stick, trying to scoop paint runoff for some imaginary HOA lab test. When I confronted her with the footage, she stared at it, blinked, and said, "That's for environmental research under community interest exemptions," then walked off like she hadn't just been busted playing spy with kitchen tools. Still, I kept going. The wall came alive, stripes shone, stars gleamed, names stood proud. Neighbors noticed too, offering nods, thumbs-ups, even cookies from an older couple who remembered the wall's origin and thanked me for reviewing it. For a bit, it felt like progress. But Lisa doesn't lose quietly. The morning after I finished the final section, glossy flyers appeared on every lamppost. "Flag frenzy. Is your family safe?" With a stock photo of a crying kid by a flag, ranting about toxic symbolism and unsanctioned memorials. 2 joggers passed me laughing. Are we being brainwashed or what? I chuckled until Sharon and Ellen returned with a formal warning, citing noise from my roller VW obstruction by a decades-old wall, and aesthetic aggression colors that evoke unbalanced emotions, Ellen explained. That's when I knew this wasn't just silly Anna Marie, it was dangerous, not just to me but to the idea of community. I decided then, I wouldn't just protect my wall, I'd expose every shred of their fake authority. Because this wasn't HOA nonsense, Anna Marie, it was about truth. And I'd drag it into the open, starting the next time Lisa stepped onto my land. I wasn't scared of her clipboards, or her crusade. If she wanted a fight, she'd get one.